Guyana Tapestry family greetings. It's Pelham with a quick check-in on this issue of President Trump's re-election and its relevance for Guyana and the Guyanese diaspora. There's a lot already going around, so let's put some perspective to it. It's February and we're just about 2 weeks in since Donald Trump took office to serve a second term. He's only the second president in US history to serve a second non-consecutive term. Quickly, do you know who the only other president to have done this is? You may have heard of President Stephen Grover Cleveland, or just Grover Cleveland. This is a Democrat who won the presidential election in 1884. He lost in 1888. Then he was re-elected to the presidency in 1892. Grover Cleveland served as the 22nd and 24th president of the United States. Donald Trump is the 45th and 47th president. And that's just a quick bit of US presidential history. But as a Guyanese, why should you care whether you live in the United States here or in the diaspora, or in Guyana? Why should you care about the re-election of President Trump in the United States? As you think about that question, ponder another. Which country is home to the most Guyanese outside of Guyana? Which country home to the most Guyanese outside of Guyana? Now, Dr. Onicola Bennett, a Guyanese-American professor, intellectual, and author of the book Global Guyana, Shaping Race, Gender, and Environment in the Caribbean and Beyond, in a recent comment on the Guyanese diaspora here in the United States, she described Guyana's oversized presence in America's most populous city, New York City. Dr. Bennett cited statistics that noted Guyanese representing the 5th largest foreign-born group and the 3rd largest Caribbean-born group in New York City. So yes, the United States is home to the largest group of Guyanese outside of Guyana. And arguably, there are more Guyanese living in the United States than there are Guyanese living in Guyana. Some folks may want to debate that, no problem. Here's another uncomfortable and touchy fact that nobody likes to talk about, but for policy reasons and the likelihood of its impact on Guyanese, a lot of us Guyanese are here undocumented in the United States. What do I mean by that? For the record, the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, defines illegal alien as a foreign-born person who entered the United States without inspection by the Immigration and Naturalization Service, or who entered the United States legally as a non-immigrant but remained in the United States beyond their authorized period of stay, sometimes referred to as overstays. Other terms used to describe this population: undocumented aliens or illegal immigrant. And interestingly, many of the Guyanese who are here working and living illegally according to that definition also pay taxes. But more importantly, and more relevant to the issue, they send enormous sums of money home to Guyana annually in remittances to do important things like help family and friends in the community, to support businesses, make investments, and they support charitable and other important work. So in other words, President Donald Trump's re-election carries, and the policies he espouses, it carries significant implications for Guyana and the Guyanese community, the diaspora community. But let's quickly look at 3 ways that President Trump's policies could affect Guyana and Guyanese. 1, importantly, economic relations and the oil industry. Guyana is currently ranked the world's fastest growing economy. In 2024, Guyana's economy grew 43.6%. This is the 5th consecutive year of double-digit growth. And this economic trajectory is largely driven by increases in oil production and exports. It's led by ExxonMobil. This is an American petroleum and petrochemicals giant. Now, Guyana's growing oil sector is positioning her to be a major player in the global oil industry, but that depends largely on stable global oil prices and an upward trajectory. One of the many executive orders President Trump signed on January 20th, Executive Order 14154, Unleashing American Energy, aims to encourage production and exploration of petroleum on federal lands, fossil fuel on federal lands here. And that is mainly to meet US domestic needs, but also to position the United States as a global leader. And this is what the executive order said. This could lead to significant increases in domestic production. And depending on the scope and volume of that production response, increases in global production can have a downward effect on global oil prices, which will, as a corollary effect, reduce Guyana's oil revenues. Oh, by the way, President Trump, since taking office, has already called on OPEC to cut oil prices. But notwithstanding that the US and Guyana held their first strategic dialogue last year, 2024, an America First policy could see the US pursuing less flexible bilateral trade arrangements with Guyana, for instance, as is the case occurring right here in North America with Mexico and Canada with the imposition of the tariffs. That would mean more challenging terms for Guyana in many areas, including oil exports. And two, immigration policies affecting the Guyanese diaspora. Another of the executive orders signed by President Trump, 14159, protecting the American people against invasion. This executive order expands the legal authorities used to enforce immigration laws against immigrants right here in the United States, but it also calls for an expansion of the infrastructure needed to accomplish those mass deportations that have already begun that the president called for. So this administration's immigration policies that emphasize rounding up immigrants in communities, the crackdowns, definitely is generating some unease in the Guyanese community here in the United States, because heightened deportations threaten people's livelihoods of the undocumented folks, but it also poses problems for social and economic reintegration, and that has always been the case already in Guyana. This is so concerning an issue that it warranted comment from Guyana's current Vice President and the General Secretary of the ruling People's Progressive Party, Civic, Dr. Barry Jagdeo. During his weekly press conference, he reiterated Guyana's commitment to accept her citizens should they face deportation. And thirdly, environmental policies and climate change stance. Executive Order 14162, putting America first in international environmental agreements, instruct the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations to immediately withdraw from the Paris Agreement under the United Nations Framework Agreement Convention on Climate Change. This administration's environmental approach to environmental regulations and their support, especially the support of fossil fuel expansion, their withdrawal from international climate agreements will definitely affect how environmental policy is framed in Guyana, especially for a country that is vulnerable to climate change effects such as sea level rise, coastal flooding. Guyana could see global climate efforts seriously diminish, which will in turn affect her climate resiliency efforts. And these are just some of the ways that changes in U.S. policy can affect and will continue to affect Guyana and Guyanese. For instance, another of President Trump's executive orders, 14169, entitled Reevaluating and Realigning United States Foreign Aid, it temporarily suspends all U.S. foreign assistance programs for 90 days pending reviews to determine whether these programs align with the president's foreign policy objectives. In the United States, the Associated Press and the National Public Radio Network, NPR, are reporting that hundreds of workers are already laid off by the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, when the new administration's stop work order went into effect. In Guyana, the Stabroek News is reporting that programs funded by USAID are already on hold. Now, USAID funds several programs in Guyana and across the Caribbean region. In Guyana, USAID programs focus on health, specifically HIV/AIDS education, prevention, treatment in the private sector, the private sector development by supporting investments in non-traditional exports and providing technical assistance to help Guyana develop financial and regulatory regimes for its offshore oil and gas resources. In energy, USAID is helping Guyana transition to renewable energies, specifically hydro and solar. USAID also helps their initiatives allow for U.S. personnel to train Guyana Defense Force personnel in areas of disaster preparedness and maritime security. And these represent just some of the ways that changes in certain US policy positions could directly or indirectly affect Guyana and Guyanese. There are an infinite number of other geopolitical scenarios that could lead to less desirable outcomes in the region. However hypothetical they may be, without question, we are living through a very interesting time in our history, to say the least. And this time, perhaps more than any other time, Guyana and Guyanese have enormous incentives to align the country and community's interests with the new US policy agenda and initiatives. Family, this is Guyana Tapestry. I am Pelham Van Kooten, and I'm telling Guyana's immigration story.